Hi everyone and welcome to DreamSpace TV, here in One Microsoft Place in Dublin. I'm Niamh.
I'm Amanda.
And in this series of 6 episodes, we're going to be learning all about how to program the microbit using Python. We're also going to be learning about artificial intelligence and how that relates to programming. And finally, we're going to be building you up towards creating your very own prototypes using microbit, which you can then work alongside the global goals. And you can submit your prototypes for judging through the Microbit Foundation's Do Your Bit Challenge.
Yeah, brilliant. But before we go into all that, because that's going to be across all the episodes we do, we want to just focus on what we're doing in this episode today. So you can see here we have a list of things that we really want to cover today. So the first thing is we want to look at the microbit itself, introduce that in case it's new. Some of you might be familiar with it, but that's okay. Just bear with us while we get everyone up to speed. And the other thing we want to talk about, like Niamh mentioned there, are the global goals as well. And what we're saying with the global goals is, if I just go in here to show you, there's basically 17 goals, and they were developed out by the United Nations. And you can see here they say the global goals for sustainable development. So sometimes they call them SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. 17 in total. Now for the Do Your Bit Challenge, there's a focus on 2 in particular. There's a focus on number 3, which is good health and well-being. And there's a focus on number 13, which is climate action. But actually across the episodes, we're going to look at how the microbit could be used for a couple of them. But just bear in mind for your challenge, they're going to be the 2 focus areas. Now, the other thing we want to cover is MakeCode. So that's one of the programming languages we're going to look at. And there's a couple of languages actually within that, which we'll discuss as we go. And we're going to cover off some key coding concepts today just to get us started when we get going with our coding. And then the final thing we're going to wrap up with is just an introduction to something called AI, which again, you might be familiar with, and look at how this can be used for good. So there's tons of stuff to cover, but we know this is going to be hopefully lay the foundations for the next couple of episodes. So stay with us as we go through them. So let's focus on number 1 for a second. So we want to introduce the microbit, right? Again, as I said, some people might be familiar with this, some people might not, but just let's have a look at this on the screen for just 1 second. And I'm actually going to grab my kind of physical one here too. Now, the microbit is a physical piece of hardware. However, for all of these episodes, you don't need that. You don't need the physical microbit because there is a virtual microbit like you can see on my screen here that we can use instead. The cool thing is though, we can program this. So we can actually give this thing instructions, which is basically what coding is, just giving something a set of instructions to follow. And we can then see what happens as a result. Now, that's called physical computing. It's how we combine code, which is software, with some hardware, okay? But as I said, let's just look at the virtual one because more than likely you might just be working with this on whatever device you're on. So with the microbit, you can see on the screen here, the first thing that normally jumps out with secondary school students when we're working with them is the buttons. So you can see it says A and B. So they're just 2 programmable buttons that we can use. And you'll see that as we get going now in a couple of moments. The other thing is on the front, this might not be very clear for you, but there are a couple of dashes and they're actually LED lights. So we can actually program these lights to do different things and display different things as well. The other thing a lot of people notice down the bottom are this gold area are pins. We probably won't go into them too much, but it's just good to know that you can actually hook these up to other things like external equipment like electronics and stuff, and you can get them to do stuff as well. And then what you cannot see is there's tons of stuff actually, isn't there, even built into it. So there's like sensors like temperature sensor, accelerometer that picks up movement, light sensors. So it looks small, you can see. All right, it might look big on the screen, but it's actually very small in real life, but it can actually do lots and lots of stuff.
It's quite a powerful device.
Yeah, it really is. So what we want you to do is before we actually get going with coding is to get yourselves just set up and ready to go. So now would be a good time to pause and go to www.makecode.microbit.org and wait there, and then we'll get going on our coding to see how we can get this to do some stuff.
Okay, so that will take you to the home page of Make Code for Microbit. And as you can see, the home page has numerous different tutorials which you can avail of in your own spare time. However, today we're going to get straight into it, Amanda. So we're going to create a new project. And as Amanda mentioned, we're going to be focusing on some of the global goals. So today we're going to particularly look at global goal number 3, good health and well-being, with a kind of an emphasis on mindfulness because I think it's so important. So I'm going to call my program Relax.
Sounds good to me.
And I'm going to create my program. And now the work page is going to open up. So this is where we're going to do all of our programming. So on the left-hand side, you can see the microbit, which Amanda went through.
Yeah.
In the middle, we've got categories, and the categories are color-coded, so that'll be helpful later on. And finally, on the right-hand side, we've got our work area where we're going to build out our programs, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on that so that it's a little bit bigger. Okay, so today we're going to get started with block-based coding, and we're going to use a visual program to do that. However, we're going to move on throughout the episodes, and we're going to move on to Python.
Yeah,
so in order
from
to get
episode 3, Niamh, I think. Yeah.
Exactly, so in order to get to Python, we have to toggle over. Okay, and this is what Python will look like. However, we're going to forget about that for now, and we're going to go back to blocks, and that's what we're going to start using today. So before we do so, I suppose it's really important to understand what an input, a process, and an output is. So you might have noticed that we've actually a category called input. So I'm going to click in here, and there's loads of blocks here. And I suppose what an input is how the microbit takes in information. So it could be through the use of a button, it might be the way in which we move the microbit, or it could also be through some of the sensors, for example, temperature, how hot or cold the area is.
Definitely.
Okay, so that's our inputs. Our processes then, they work with that information and we can use our program to decide on this. And finally, our outputs are generally just what's displayed on the microbit. So it's just important to capture that before we get started. But I think now we're going to begin. So we're going to go through the basics of visual programming. So I'm going to show you how to delete a block first, and then we're going to get started. So in order to delete a block, you just grab on it and you bring it over to the bin, or if you're using a mouse, you can click on it using the right click and delete it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go straight to my inputs and I'm going to pick an input. So Amanda, any inputs?
Sure, we'll start. I mentioned the fact that normally the first thing that jumps out at everyone when they're coding is the buttons.
Yeah.
So when they're looking at the microbit, people always say, oh, I've noticed the buttons here, or even if they had it, the first thing they do is click on them. That's what I do anyway. I'm fidgety, so I like clicking on stuff.
So we'll use on button A pressed. And the first thing I'm going to show is how to do a string. And a string is alphanumeric. So Amanda, would you like to explain what alphanumeric means?
Yeah, so basically alphanumeric just means that a string can contain letters, numbers, and even characters such as like exclamation marks, full stops, that kind of stuff. And strings are across all programming languages, so it's a really common term. So it's a good one to start on just to get our heads into the coding frame of mind.
Exactly, and Amanda, I might keep you busy because it takes a little bit of time for me to type on the keyboard with the touch screen.
Oh, okay, cool,
so I might get you to do my typing for me.
Yeah, no worries. So let me know what you want to type in here.
Maybe because we're focusing on global goal number 3, maybe type in SDG, Sustainable Development Goal 3, and maybe put some sort of a symbol to it just to show that it's alphanumeric. Exactly.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay,
great.
so let's test that out. I'm going to go full screen and I'm going to press my button A and it's going to display SDG and 3.
And just to say, like, that's something you're after doing, Niamh, is really important. When we talk about coding and sets of instructions, that's just a really simple start. But the more we code, the more instructions there are for the program. And so it's really important to test as you go. Niamh just did it out of habit there. Yeah. So that's a habit that we want you to try and get into as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good habit to have. So I'm going to exit full screen mode and I'm going to go back and look at my program again. So I suppose that's one of the basic things. Something else which we can cover is maybe how to show a number.
Yeah.
But what I was thinking of was how to display the microbit picking a random number between two values. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick another input, and this time I'm going to go with on button B pressed. I'm going to drag it in and I'm going to toggle over. And actually, it might be worth noting now, this block is after turning a different color, which means there's a bug or there's a problem in our code. And the bug or the problem is that we can't have two button A's. We can't have two programs for button A. So we're going to toggle down and we're going to change it to B, and then it should get its nice colour back. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the basic category and I'm going to drag out show number. And at the moment, if I typed in a number, it would just display the number I type in. However, that's not what we want to do. We want the microbit to pick a random number between two specific values. And we might go with the global goal, seeing as there's 17, we'll get it to pick a random global goal and then you can call it out from the list.
Perfect.
So to get that block, it's down in the maths category and it's down here, pick random, and it allows us to input two different values. So I'm going to drag that out and I'm going to pop it in here.
People might be familiar with that because I know in secondary schools you do lots on probability and things like that where you have to think about what would be selected and calculate probability. So this is a good one for maths as well, for probability and stuff too.
Exactly, and I'm going to use the connector. I didn't want to connect it there just yet. I'm going to use the connector to guide it to where I want it to go. So it's going to slot in there because it's roughly the same shape, which I could have assumed anyways. And Amanda, if you would do me the honours of typing in 1 and 17, so our random values.
No worries. 1,
and hopefully then it will pick a random number. However, what I'm going to have to remember to do is press button B rather than button A, otherwise it'll show me my string. So I suppose, again, to reiterate, we're going to test our program, see if it works. So again, I'll go full screen and I'll press button B. And it picked global goal number 11. Amanda, would you like to tell us?
I don't know them off by heart just yet. I haven't got too good at learning everything off by heart here. But number 11 I can see on my sheet is sustainable cities and communities.
Very good, and that's quite important. So I'm going to exit full screen mode and maybe we'll cover one more thing to get a broad kind of a look at the basics of Make Code for Microbit, and then we might move on. So the next thing I'm going to do is how to create an animation. And bearing in mind that my particular focus is mindfulness, I might create an animation that I'd be able to use to control my breath, to maybe breathe in and breathe out.
Yeah, and it's really familiar actually. I think my watch does it.
Exactly.
So you can say, like, I want to just focus on my breathing for a minute. And no doubt in schools, this comes in useful, maybe more so for teachers. Take a deep breath. But the students are probably saying, no, it's us that has to stay calm. But yeah, it can be really useful. So that's a cool idea. Let's do that.
Perfect. And Amanda, with an animation, we have to kind of create the illusion of movement. If we just put up one picture there, we're not really going to create an animation as such. So again, I'm going to use another input. I'm going to use unshake this time. And I'm going to drag it down here.
One of our movements.
And I'm going to move up my work side ever so slightly to make more room. So now I'm going to bring out a show icon block. So there's already preloaded icons in the Make Code for Microbit platform. So I'm going to drag out this show icon block and bring it into my new input unshake. And I'm going to use the drop-down menu to see if any of them tickle my fancy, if any of them would help me relax. So I might focus in on the small diamond shape. I think that's quite plain and I'll be able to focus in on that one. Okay, so that's my first icon. So again, we're creating the illusion of movement. So I'm going to duplicate this, and this just saves us some time instead of going back into the basic category and getting it. So in order to do that, I'm going to press down on my block and press duplicate. However, if you're using a mouse, you right click and you'll be able to duplicate then. Okay, so again, I don't want it to be the same animation or then that's pointless. So I'm going to go down and see if there's anything else that might match my diamond.
And just while you're doing that, Niamh, another thing to point out would be you could make your own kind of icon if you wanted. There's another option in basic called Show LED. So you could actually go in there and do your own. So Niamh's going with the pre-made icons. That will help us get through the episode.
You're one step ahead of me, Amanda. I'm going to cover that now in 1 second, how to do that. So what we're going to do with the show icon is we're going to breathe in with maybe the smaller diamond shape and breathe out with the larger diamond. So I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to shake it and see how we get on, or see what it looks like. I'm not going to go full screen this time. So that was very fast. You wouldn't really have time to breathe in, let alone breathe out if we were to do that. So I might incorporate some pauses to allow us the time to actually breathe in, and then when it changes, we can breathe out.
Yeah, good shout.
So again, I know that the pauses are in my basic category.
And if you didn't know where the pauses were, there's a little search bar at the top, isn't there, Niamh? So people could just have an idea and think, like, I'll actually search a word.
Do you want to maybe type in
even? I'll go in,
we can
pause.
demonstrate it.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Perfect, so it comes up here.
And it came up. So
anything with P will come up, and then as you refine it, it'll obviously pick the right one. So I'm going to pop it in between my two blocks here. And Amanda, would you maybe explain what the MS stands for?
Yeah, so one thing is, like, obviously the reason you put it in here is because the order of our code or our instructions is important. So we have like a little diamond is the first thing, and then we're telling it to pause there, and then we're gonna have a big diamond, but the pause says ms, which is milliseconds. And 100 milliseconds is a tenth of a second.
So it'll be very fast.
Really fast, yeah. So basically 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. So Niamh, how many seconds do you want to do for this?
Maybe we'll go with 2 seconds.
Okay, so that means I'm going to have to type in here 2,000, or you can see you could actually select it there if you want, but I'll just type it in just to explain. So now we have this for 2 seconds, but then this, and it probably will stop. So I think you want to do another one, do you?
I think I'm going to add another pause so that we can have 2 seconds to kind of breathe out. And I'm going to duplicate again just because it's easier than going back in and getting it. And because I want it for 2 seconds, I'm going to leave it at 2,000.
Perfect, lovely.
So I think that looks a bit better than the first time. I'm going to test it out and see how much time we have. So I think we've enough time to breathe in and out.
Yeah.
However, when I use my smartwatch to relax in terms of mindfulness, one thing I notice is I normally don't get into my breaths until maybe the third or fourth go. So that would be very quick if I were only to do it once. So how about I repeat this a certain number of times? So I might use a loop. Amanda, would you explain what a loop is to everyone?
Yeah, so a loop basically is the way for us to repeat instructions. But what we do want to point out, because we're going to look at this across the episodes, is that there's 2 types of loop. So the first one is called a for loop, and the second one is called a while loop. A for loop is the one we're probably going to use in this case, because what a for loop does is it allows us to set the number of times. So I think you want to actually dictate how many times this happens.
Exactly.
So it's the first block there, Niamh, you can grab.
So I'm going to grab my for loop, and I'm going to be careful where I place it. So I want it to go around my entire animation. So I can see now that it's going to slot in where that darker shaded area is. And we might leave it at 4, so it's going to repeat 4 times over.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go full screen. Again, I'm going to test because I'm after adding in a new block, and I'm going to shake my microbit. And then
You
it's going
can't
to
see,
change.
but I'm doing me breathing here now as well, so I'm very chill.
And now it's on to its second round, and it'll repeat that 4 times and then stop. So I think now would be a good time to pause and get to grips with the MakeCode for Microbit platform, figure where the different blocks are, and create your very own animation that will help you relax and control your breathing. So hopefully you've got to grips with that, and that's how to use one animation. However, we might push things a little bit further, Amanda, and we might create a well-being or a mindfulness picker, kind of like a tool, whereby it'll have different options. It won't play the same one over and over again, because that will be a bit boring and monotonous. So in order to do that, we need to create a variable, because a variable allows us to give those options.
Yeah, exactly. So variables are something we use in, again, all programming languages. You're going to come across variables. They're really, really important. And what they are, they're things that we create and that store, say, data or store some sort of value. And the cool thing about them is then as you use the program, they can update. So that value can update as you go, which you might notice as we do this program.
Exactly.
So if you want to go into variable there, Niamh.
Perfect. And we make a variable.
Yeah.
So Amanda, if you name the variable, we might name it, let me see, relax.
Okay. Yeah, relax.
And I'll press OK. And now the first thing we need to do is we need to set the variable. So we need to allow the variable to know how many times it needs to change or how many options we want to give it. So I'm going to set my variable, and I'm going to bring it in onto the very top of my program. Okay? And bringing us back to that idea of picking random. So we want a certain number of conditions. So we wanted to pick at random. So I think maybe 3 might be enough for our well-being picker.
Yeah, for the moment.
For the moment, exactly. So what I can do here is I can duplicate our pick random block from earlier. And that will come in handy because I can connect it up here. The only thing is it has 17 options, and we said we might change it to between 1 and 3 so that it has 3 different options.
Perfect. And actually, the other thing we might do is just move out the code that we did already. We're going to use that, I think, aren't we? But just so everyone can see, we might just move out the repeat block for a second.
Exactly, just to give us a little bit of room for now.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've set our variable relax to pick between 3 different options, we have to tell it what to do when it picks one of those options. So if it picks a 1, a 2 or a 3. So we need to set the conditions necessary for 1, 2 and 3. And in order to do that, we have to use an if then else block. So Amanda, would you like to explain what an if then else block is?
Yeah, so a conditional statement is really important, and what it does is it allows us to explain what should happen if certain situations are present in the program. So for example, in the situation that it picks 1, 2 or 3, it needs to be told what to do. So conditions are brilliant for that one. So the top one there, Niamh, should do the job for you at the start.
Perfect.
Anyway, to start us off.
Well, and I'm going to drag it in and drop it underneath where I set my variable.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the moment it only has room for 1 option. So I'm going to expand it out and have enough room for each of my 3 options. That's the first thing I'm going to do. And now I'm going to have a look at it and see what it actually says. So if true then. So I want to kind of change that so it's saying more so if my relax variable is equal to 1, then show the conditions necessary for 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to use a comparison block to do that. And again, that's in logic, and it's down here. And it allows us to say if something is equal to something, or we can change that to if something is greater than or less than. But we're going to use equal in this case. So if our variable relax, so again, go back to our variable, and we're going to pick the one that we think will connect into our first 0, and we have to be careful where we're connecting it. And if our variable relax is equal to 1.
1. And actually just on that as well, so this is the first, when we talk about, as I said, what conditions where they're checking for certain situations.
Exactly.
So that's the very first situation it's going to check for. Is the variable relax equal to 1? And if it's not, it will keep moving down through the other conditions to check their situations.
Precisely. So if the variable is equal to 1, what do we want it to do for 1? So I think we can use the animation we've already created.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring that up and make sure that it goes into the first area. Okay, so now I'm going to maybe just zoom out ever so slightly so that we can see that in its full entirety. So we've set our variable and we've set the condition for if it picks a 1. We might maybe extend it and set the condition for if it picks a 2 and then let everyone at home finish it out. So we've got if and now else if, but we need to go back and get our comparison block. So again, I'm going to go to logic and I'm going to bring, or actually what I can do is just duplicate this one. It'd be a lot easier. Murphy's Law, when you try to do something quicker, it never works. So I'm going to connect that in. And Amanda, if you wouldn't mind doing me the honor of changing it, that if our picker is equal to 2. So if our picker or our relax variable is equal to 2, what's it going to do for 2? And again, to be quick and give you more time to get yours done, I'm going to duplicate my code. However, I'm going to manipulate it. I'm going to change it ever so slightly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this block out. And instead of using a show icon, I'm going to delete that. I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to use a show LED. Just to make it ever so slightly different to my first animation. And again, I'm going to change this icon to maybe we breathe in on a big square, and then down here I'm going to create a smaller square. Just like this. So I tap on the LEDs that I want to light up, and if they turn white, it means they're going to they're going to light up. But if I make a mistake and tap on the wrong box, I can easily rectify it by hitting it again. Okay, so now I've got my diamond-shaped animation and I've got my square-shaped animation. So it means that it's going to pick that at random. Now, the one thing I've left is I haven't done my third one. So it could potentially pick that and pick nothing because I haven't filled in anything for it when I test it. But I think I'm going to test it now and see how I get on. So I'm going to go full screen.
Hopefully it'll go 1 or 2 just so as to see if it works.
Exactly. So I'm going to shake it. So it picked the diamond. And then it's going to repeat that 4 times because that's what we've programmed it to do. Okay, so that's how to create a picker with 3 different options. And now that's what we would like you to do. So now would be a good time to pause and finish out your well-being or your calming LEDs picker. Okay, so hopefully you got on all right finishing out that program that Niamh started you off with.
And the cool thing about this is you might be at the beginning of your coding journey, and coding is behind like all of the technologies we use every single day. So no matter what you think of, whether it's some hardware like a computer, whether it's like an app or a website or a video game, code is the instructions behind all that. But one of the coolest technologies that we always talk about to secondary school students is AI, or artificial intelligence, which is one of the things we said we wanted to at least introduce you to today. So now would be a good time to pause and have a discussion about, first of all, what is AI? And then secondly, come up with a couple of examples of that in your everyday life. So hopefully you had a chance there to think about what AI actually is. So Niamh, what do you think AI is?
Well, AI is the ability for a computer program to think and act like a human. So it can problem solve and figure things out and assist a lot of people in their everyday lives.
Yeah, definitely can. Whether it's like in their everyday life, just getting around, contacting people, communicating, or actually professionally. Obviously, a lot of companies use AI as well.
Exactly.
And the thing is with AI, it can think, it can problem solve, it can give you answers. They might not be right, but it's very human-like, which is why they use the word intelligence as part of that. And the more human-like it is, the more the AI has actually been trained, probably. We use these things every day. Some of the examples you might have come up with there could have been things like a voice assistant, like Cortana, Alexa, Siri. You might have talked about something like a chatbot. There's tons and tons of examples. And we don't even know sometimes that we're even interacting with AI. And a lot of the time, we definitely don't know what's behind it. So let's take a second just to have a look at what could be behind it. And I'm going to write this out nearly like a formula, if that's all right, just to kind of see, can we break down how a lot of AI programs work. Now, there are variations. That's really important to point out. It's kind of hard to cover all of AI even in a day, let alone in a couple of minutes here. But hopefully we just get the building blocks down, because we will talk about this across all the episodes. So I'm going to write it like a formula. So I'm going to say AI is equal to, and the first thing I would talk about with AI is the importance of data. So data is just information. So AI, this intelligence, has to be trained on lots and lots of information. We'll go to an example of this in a second. But that's the first kind of core element of any AI program. The second thing it works a lot with, so if I say plus, the second thing it works with are algorithms. Again, probably a word you might be familiar with something like maths, but algorithms are just formulas. And what happens is with a lot of AI technologies, the algorithm gets applied to the data. So these work kind of together, okay? So this formula works with the data to give you an answer a lot of the time. Okay, and the third thing then is machine learning. So machine learning is we could go on about this for quite long. It's a big concept. And it's a long word, hence I'm here for ages writing. But machine learning is really interesting. So what that is the ability for this AI program to learn as it goes and improve. So think about this, like when you were a toddler, you probably don't remember, I certainly don't remember. When you're learning to walk, you might like stumble and fall over, and then you'll get back up again, and you might fall again. But the more that happens, the more you learn from it. It's called reinforcement learning. And it's actually one way that machine learning works too. Basically, when a mistake is made, it's corrected and it learns from that mistake. That's extremely human if you think about it, that ability to learn. So a lot of AI programs use that to be really, really human-like. Now, that can be quite tricky to understand. So I do want to just show you what we mean by these three things working together. And the one thing I want to jump into here is something called facial recognition, which potentially could have been one of the examples that you came up with when you were chatting about different types of AI. So you can see here, we're on something here called Microsoft Azure's Cognitive Services. So these are services that are used, and one of them is called Face. So it's about the facial recognition aspect. And what this can do is we can upload photos into this, and it can very quickly use AI and those three things we just talked about to first of all identify, are there people in the photo? So you can see the kind of tags or these squares that have gone around people's faces. And when it's done that, it's also able to pick out kind of unbelievably kind of accurate features about them, isn't it, Niamh? Like we do this sometimes demoing, don't we, here?
And it can pick out emotion. It can pick out the emotion of the people in the photograph.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Hair colour as well. It can pick out, well, it will try and pick your age. This upsets a lot of people because it might be wrong and it might be on the higher side age-wise. So you would tread carefully with this one. But you can see here, for example, if I go down in this area, and actually I'm just going to zoom in because this is kind of hard to see, and we might lose the photo slightly. But in this kind of area here with the box, yeah, I'm on the right one. I'm going to just go down, and I want you just to look really carefully. It says hair color there. Then it says color, blonde, confidence 1.0. Now this is referring to this person here on the left of the photo. And what it's saying is 1.0 is basically that the program is 100% confident that this person's hair is blonde. Okay, that's the first thing it's telling us. If the number was 0.91 like that, that's like a 90% confidence rate. But if we had to definitely get an answer from this AI program and we asked it hair color, it would say blonde. It might not always be right, by the way. That's the really important thing about AI to know. That's why we still need humans. But it will have a fairly good guess, and it will be pretty close to accurate. If we go down, it thinks gender female, age 21. And like Niamh said there, emotions. So if you look at the emotion list there, you can see anger, contempt. There's all these different types of emotion. And we can see it's saying neutral. 0.996. So that's the most accurate the computer feels it is for that person's emotion, neutral. Probably because her mouth is kind of just like straight across. You know, it's not a big smile, it's not a frown, it's not surprised. Like there's, you know, it's able to kind of pick that out. Now, if we think back to our formula for a second here, okay? So data, algorithms, machine learning. So facial recognition was trained with data, first of all. Tons and tons of images, basically, photos of people, all right? It got trained on that, and it learned then to use algorithms alongside this. Now, if we think about the algorithms piece for a second, if I go down in here, you can see it says face landmarks, okay? And it says X, Y, X, Y, X, Y. So you're probably familiar with this from coordinate geometry in maths. They're coordinates. And so that's just literally the landmarks in a person's face. It's coordinates. And so we have formulas that identify those landmarks in a person's face based on the data that it's been trained on. And that's how it works. And the cool thing is, Niamh, then, that we talk about all the time is the machine learning piece.
Exactly.
So the more feedback this program got about things that were wrong, like, no, that was the wrong age, for example, which, you know, too late then if you've told somebody that they're 60 and they're only 40, but anyway. So wrong ages, wrong hair colors, all that kind of stuff, it gets trained, and then it will learn and it will improve as it goes. So technically, they want this system to be as accurate as somebody else. Now, you might think to yourself, well, sure, that's grand, but I can look at that photo and guess hair color, age and stuff, and you're spot on. But the thing is with AI, we could have a photo of 1,000 people. How fast would you be at going through a photo of 1,000 people? It would probably take you quite a while, whereas the AI technology can still do that in a split second. And that's where the power of the technology can step in. One other thing, and we're covering off a bit here, but I want to discuss one final thing that we're going to also touch on in the next few episodes. And that's about how that AI technology and this formula can be used to help. We talked about that a second ago, Niamh, about personal lives. So we do have something that we like to look at called AI for Good. And AI for Good in Microsoft, kind of instead of just saying, oh, we want to help, we've really focused in on specific, what we call pillars. So you can see here, there are 5 pillars, and we are going to touch on these across the episodes we do. We have AI for Earth, AI for accessibility, AI for humanitarian action, AI for cultural heritage, and AI for health. And what we want you to do is just watch this video now and see, can you pick out these pillars within it.
Like never before, our world is changing. Faced with some of our most critical challenges, human ingenuity triumphs. Today, the Microsoft AI for Good initiative enables a person with an idea to accelerate it, to give it scale, to create change for the better.
Microsoft AI will help our work by empowering people to take action.
Through AI for Earth, photos can now help save a species. With AI for accessibility, the visual world becomes an audible experience.
Sanitarium peanut butter.
And with AI for humanitarian action, first responders can target their efforts faster than ever before.
It feels humbling to know that I'm actually helping another human being.
Today, we are empowering others to forge new paths, to fight famine before a crisis strikes, and protect ecosystems by identifying forests down to a single tree.
We have the forest that we have today. We can't change that. What we can change is the future.
Microsoft AI is fueling some of the most passionate and creative people on our planet, with the help of citizen scientists, to make change, once thought impossible, real.
AI will know and understand and model based on the child interaction.
AI unleashes new possibilities to impact our world. And together, we're not just dreaming it, we're doing it.
So there is tons of examples there in the video of how we use AI for good. And as I said, we will touch on them over the next few episodes. You saw ones there where we looked at AI for Earth, identifying animals, etc. We're going to touch on that, for example, in episode 2. But we've done a lot today. So I think we will just check out and see, did we cover what we wanted to cover? And let's have a look. So we said that we would look at microbit and global goals. So hopefully everyone's okay on those. We said we would cover the key coding concepts in MakeCode. So the key concepts we really want you to have understood from today is the idea of sequences, so the order of our instructions, loops, variables, and conditions. So they were the key ones. And then finally, we've done our little introduction to AI and our AI for good pillars. And all of this stuff is going to be crucial as we move on. All right, so that was a lot to cover, I think, wasn't it, Niamh?
Yeah. Now we want you to practice what we've covered. So we want to assign you an extension challenge. And for your extension challenge, we want you to come up with 5 unique conditions for your well-being picker. And if you really want to challenge yourself, I think we would like you to think about AI and how AI could be incorporated into your well-being picker to encourage someone to use this mindfulness tool a little bit more.
Okay, so that's all we have time for. Hopefully you got lots out of today, you learned new things, and you'll be able to join us next time. We'll chat to you then. Bye.
Bye.